Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. I'm very glad to be in Vietnam. Indeed, I have mixed feelings towards Vietnam, having spent just above a week exploring Vietnam from Da Nang, Hoi An, Halong Bay, and now Hanoi. My wife and I have already fell in love with this beautiful country and its people. On the other hand, I'm a bit upset because before the Vietnamese football team beat Syria yesterday, they beat my national team, Bahrain, 5 days ago. Nevertheless, in the spirit of good sportsmanship, I'm privileged to stand before you today and to be invited to speak at the Indian Ocean Conference. I thank and express my appreciation to the Indian Foundation for organizing and sponsoring this prestigious intellectual platform to meet and share diverse ideas and creative visions for ensuring world peace and prosperity. The history and geography of this important region of the world have always been connected to the Arabian Gulf region, making these two regions a center for trade and commerce, cultural relations, and the pursuit of knowledge. The links that binds us also give us the ability to respond to the threats of extremism and terrorism, as well as to the development issues, climate change, and other challenges that our two regions face collectively. In my remarks, I will focus on our vision for building a new regional structure in the Gulf region, considering that the Gulf is one of the most important areas of the international security order, as it represents a strategic source of energy within the wider regional picture. The Middle East has, since 2011, been a theater of military operations, civil wars, a center for exporting terrorism, exporting refugees, and a source for spreading sectarianism and religious violence. The region has, in just a few years, seen upheavals and instability that was worse than any other part of the world has witnessed, with serious implications for the collective security of the region. During the so-called Arab Spring, the Middle East region went through an unprecedented phase of spiraling chaos, and the state's institutions' collapse in a number of countries have paved the way for foreign powers to interfere in their internal affairs. For the first time since gaining independence, certain Arab countries have faced serious threats by sectarian groups and terrorist organizations that undermined their existence as states. The United Nations estimates of the losses caused by protests and unrests in several countries in the Middle East are about $614 billion during the period of 2011 to 2015. According to official Arab estimates, losses reached $900 billion at the beginning of this year, in addition to 1.4 million people dead and 15 million refugees. At the same time, the information and communication technologies revolution and changes in the structure of the world order have brought to the scene new security dimensions that reflect the changing interests of the major powers and their sphere of influence. The threat of terrorism comes also as a serious challenge with the rise of terrorist groups, organizations, and militias, and the spread of the ideologies of extremism and religious violence. On the other hand, the region also faces economic and social challenges that are no less important than fighting terrorism, such as the fall in the price of oil, creation of job opportunities for young people, and the need to continue providing investment incentives. Despite all these challenges, the picture is not bleak. Moderate Gulf states have achieved major successes, most notably the establishment of the Islamic Military Counterterrorism Coalition led by Saudi Arabia. The primary objective of the coalition, which has about 40 member states, is to protect Muslim countries from all the terrorist groups and organizations and preserve the security and stability of the region. Also, Iran's blatant interference in the internal affairs of Arab states has also been checked. And internal problems started to surface in Iran as a result of deteriorating economic conditions. The indications are that radical changes taking place may lead to the emergence of a new Iran. Also, the hostile practices of Qatar have been curtailed as a result of the boycott which was imposed by the Arab Quartet, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Egypt, and Bahrain, in accordance with international law, within the context of restoring the balance in the region. Dear friends, the victory of the international coalition over the so-called Islamic states in Iraq and Syria and the vast territories it has lost does not mean that the end of terrorism is in sight. There are still many obstacles to achieving sustainable security. The extreme theocratic ideology is still alive and expresses itself in violent acts whenever it has a chance. There is a need to fight the ideologies of radical groups and eliminate the causes that lead to the adoption of extremist ideology and the recruitment of young people in the name of religion. We should also expect that terrorists can and are capable of planning for a new generation of unconventional capabilities, goals, strategies, and tactics. Terrorist groups cannot be limited to ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but should also include the groups supported by Iran, including the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and terrorist groups and cells in Gulf states. They are terrorist militias with intolerant sectarian ideology. Efforts should be made as part of global partnerships to counter cyber terrorism. Cut off the financial lifeline that allows terrorist groups to expand and punish states that sponsor terrorism. Therefore, we see the reimposition of US economic sanctions on Iran and the 12 demands set by the US for concluding a new deal is the right way to go forward. Because the current nuclear agreement provides opportunities for the Iranian regime to suppress its people, destabilize the security of its neighbors, and continue to develop its ballistic missile systems. The question here, did Iran change its behavior after the deal? And the answer is, of course it did, but to the worse. Ladies and gentlemen, to deal with the dramatic changes in the structure of the regional order and the increased threats to the security of the Gulf region, there is a number of successful international practices that can be used to build a stable security structure in the region, as was the case with the continents of Asia and Europe. Of late, there were certain ideas for the establishment of such regional security arrangements, but these were designed to serve the interests of those countries proposing them, and not the interests of all parties involved. These proposals disregarded the balance in the region and the requirements of cooperation and partnership. They lack the mechanisms capable of dealing with the existing crises or provide realistic solutions to prevent the escalation. The establishment of a comprehensive and sustainable regional order acceptable to all parties requires the building of trust and confidence that Iran sees all hostile behaviors and ends its interferences in the region's affairs based on the principles of security for all and become a normal, peace-loving state. The same applies to Qatar. I do not want to appear pessimistic, but I believe that the Tehran and Doha regimes need to undergo a radical rehabilitation process so that they can be included in any acceptable regional arrangements. Iran must rid itself of racism, support of terrorism, and the mafia practices. Its neighbors have for decades suffered from its hostile behavior. Qatar is under a regime that lacks maturity, and we cannot allow a child play with a bomb among people just because he affords the price of one. Such an order also requires the acceptance of diversity, of coexistence and tolerance, and the agreement to settle differences through dialogue, as well as the creation of formulas for mutual economic cooperation. In this context, the Kingdom of Bahrain looks forward to building a balanced and effective regional security framework that combines security and development based on the principles of reform, good governance, fighting all forms of extremism and terrorism, non-interference in the affairs of other countries, and strengthening of strategic partnerships. The Kingdom of Bahrain, under the leadership of His Majesty King Ahmed bin Ahmed Al Khalifa, has laid out a clear vision for Gulf security based on a continuous and self-sustainable reform process. Security and development as a necessary need for prosperity and combating terrorism. Bahrain's vision emphasizes the role of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, as a regional organization that promotes peace and stability and seeks solutions and political initiatives for the region's crises. The Kingdom of Bahrain presents the partnership of moderation as a means for establishing an effective, self-sustainable region order that is based on reason and harmony and can provide genuine security guarantees and safeguard the interests of all countries and preserve peace and stability in the region. Dear friends, our battle is an essential part of an all-out war against terrorism, poverty, and ignorance. This war must cover all kinds of terrorist activities, such as the organizing, funding, arming, and media support terrorist groups. On the other hand, conducive environments should be created to ensure the success of reforms and sustainable development. From this rostrum, I invite all of us to use this international forum as a starting point for widening and deepening our partnership through coming up with innovative mechanisms and new ideas to enrich our shared values, foremost among which are our noble human values. To conclude, I salute you, the Indian Foundation and its partners, for your wonderful work and look forward to your constructive discussions and valuable recommendation. I thank you for your attention.